Hello, everybody. Sorry about this late update. I was going to make an update early in March, and then, God, the world turned upside down. The Iran war happened, and I spent all February studying the kind of looking into the Epstein files, and really kind of I know people on the Epstein files actually, not the kind of shady stuff. I mean, just the scientists and AI people, and so it's been a busy time, and yeah, the world is going crazy, isn't it? And so I've been really distracted. And I prepared a talk for this update, and I got two talks now. I've got to talk about the Epstein thing, the whole Epstein thing, and the kind of like the Iran war thing and prophecies and what's going on and what's going to happen next. And actually, funny, the Epstein thing ties in with the Iran war thing in a kind of funny way. So yeah, what I was going to do is basically just give you an update of what I've been doing and basically just talk about this whole the Epstein affair because I think it's quite major. It's quite a major thing. It has quite a deep meaning and quite a deep implication to it. And I've been kind of really thinking about it a lot. So I'm going to kind of like give you a kind of different take on things. Okay, I'm going to give you a kind of different angle, show you where it comes from, the higher meaning of the Epstein phenomena, what's unfolding now. And also, an interesting take is that what I'm doing personally is actually very interesting to the kind of people that Epstein was involved with and the organizations he was involved with. And if he was, still alive, and at some point I probably would have met him, or in the future I probably will meet the current Epstein, whoever he is. So I think a different take on the whole, the kind of like Epstein analysis is basically where does it come from? So many people are saying it comes from this. Kind of breakaway Jewish sect called Sabbatean Frankism. Okay, so I'm gonna really analyze in depth what that is and kind of give a new perspective, I guess, a new perspective, and where does it come from? What does it mean, and where is it going? Okay, and how can we influence where is it going? Okay, so that's the a little kind of presentation I've prepared for this kind of March update, which is it's almost April now, but it's been delayed because I've been working on this other talk about Iran and what's going on. We are living in interesting times. We really are living in kind of catastrophic, cataclysmic times. What's unfolding? I mean, it's yeah. Anyway, Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein. There's two sides to the story. Okay, there's two sides to this Epstein phenomena. There's this thing, this person, this beast, this funny character. Whatever you want to look at it, however you want to look at it. There's kind of two sides. Okay, obviously the side you hear about most on the news is the pedophile side, the kind of the really kind of dodgy, dark, satanic, really kind of dark stuff that it's been circulating for years. People have been talking about the pedophilia, adrenochrome blood drinking thing, the kind of like, just kind of cabals, indulging in really kind of like depraved stuff, cannibalism or what that kind of stuff. And for years, I mean, giving public talks, I mean, people have been telling me this stuff for years. Okay, I've been kind of like dismissing it. I've been going, you're nut job, you're a funny conspiracy theory nut. And in light of the Epstein files, I mean, seriously. I never thought I'd be saying this, but I mean, it seems that in the higher echelons of power, there exists psychopaths who do the most depraved, psychopathic, evil things. And we think there's a reason for it. Okay, it has to do with this kind of Sabbatean Frankist breakaway sect within Judaism. We'll explain what it is later on. Do this whole kind of bar worship, Moloch, satanic, kind of like a snuff movie, all kinds of torture videos, people exchanging torture video stuff, sex parties, pedophilia. The rumors have been circulating for decades, and a very notable person who tried to expose it back in 1999 was actually Stanley Kubrick. Okay, arguably one of the greatest filmmakers who ever lived, and his film Eyes Wide Shut, the last film he ever made. And he died, some people say mysteriously, just before it was released, just after it was shown to the executives who were funding it. Well, it's really all about this kind of sex cult, this kind of cabal, this kind of like powerful elite people using prostitutes, young women, girls, babies for sexual purposes. And if you pre-Epstein, if you watch Eyes Wide Shut, then you might speculate maybe conspiracy theory, maybe not. But now it's absolutely crystal clear that basically Kubrick was trying to expose this kind of sect, this kind of secret cabal network that and I watched the film again, and it's so very clear. There's a whole industry of analyses on the Eyes Wide Shut. Basically, if you want to, a quick analysis, it's basically it's really to do with the message is hidden in two kinds of toys. It's toy tigers, kind of tiger teddy bears and tiger stuffed toys and teddy bears. So basically, that's what Kubrick is using to flag up his message. Okay, so what he's doing is this, like just a very quick analyses in a few minutes. I mean, it's all entire analyses going on for hours on Eyes Wide Shut and the meaning of it. But it's basically to do with tigers and teddy bears. And what Kubrick is saying, the hidden message is, and it's not so hidden now, and it's not so hidden after the Epstein stuff has come to light. Basically, halfway through the movie, there's a street prostitute, and she's lying on a bed, and there's a stuffed tiger beside her. Camera pans away, pans back to her, and then the tiger is reversed. Okay, so Kubrick has real attention to detail in all his movies. So it's not just reversed for no reason. Anyway, Kubrick is saying keep an eye on the tigers. Anyway, jump to the end of the film. The last 5 minutes is in a toy shop, and basically this is where Kubrick is delivering his kind of message, I guess, his expose of the sex cult, or whatever you want to call it. Basically, in the toy shop, if you see the film, just look everywhere where there is a toy tiger and everywhere where there is a teddy bear. And what he's implying is basically what he's saying. Okay, what he is suggesting is that okay, so juxtaposition of tigers and teddy bears. He's saying basically that okay, so there's a pram and there's a tiger. Okay, and then there's a scene where okay, there's like a mouse toy thing clinging on the shelf, and then a tiger's facing it. Okay, then a few minutes later, there's a scene where Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise are talking, and there's a teddy bear sat there, and it's got an like a you see clearly there's like an erect phallus in between the teddy bear's legs. Then the film flashes to the daughter who's holding up a Tinkerbell doll, and then it flashes back to Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise, and then the hanging mouse has fallen into the lap of the teddy bear with the erect phallus, and then there's a tiger looking at at the scene. So the suggestion there is basically little girl wearing Tinkerbell outfit, Barbie doll. No, she wears a Tinkerbell outfit right at the beginning of the movie, and she wants to see the Nutcracker. Stay up late to see the Nutcracker right at the beginning of the movie. And then she's holding up this Tinkerbell Barbie, and then the mouse falls into the teddy bear. Now the final message of the movie, it's so crystal clear. Basically, the young girl right at the end of the movie. Okay, it's almost like Nicole Kidman, the mother, says goodbye to the girl, pats her head. She walks away, looks back. Okay. Anyway, she walks away, following two men who were at the beginning of the movie in the party at the beginning of the movie, which was before the big sex party, the big orgy sex party. So the implication is very clear. What Kubrick is saying is basically, yeah, there was this huge sex cabal, with really powerful people, the most powerful people in society. And they use high class prostitutes. They use, all kinds of people, women and stuff, glamorous models and stuff like that. But they also take your young children. Okay. And then also he's suggesting they also take your babies. Okay. So that's what Kubrick is saying. I never thought I'd be saying this kind of stuff, but in light of the Epstein thing, I got to say to these kind of people, conspiracy theorists, I used to call them, who I used to say, oh yeah, I used to dismiss, I used to listen, listen, dismiss, dismiss. Well, facts change, and you have to change your mind basically. So yeah, that's one side of the Epstein thing, and which is very making the headlines now. And but there's this whole other side, which is even more interesting. Okay, and some analysts actually say that the sex stuff is to distract from this other stuff, which is more important. And it's still the fact that Epstein was interested in science, he was interested in artificial intelligence, he was interested in banking, in cryptocurrency, all these different things. And the idea is basically Epstein. He's quite a remarkable character because he's passed through all the kind of the institutions and the kind of people and the groups and the families, the dynasties, who are most often associated by the conspiracy theorists. I don't necessarily use this in a pejorative way. I mean, people conspire, but this is the big conspiracy theory of the ages. Okay, it's the idea that basically there's a groups trying to create a new one world order, and organizations involved in this creation of this one world order include groups like Council on Foreign Relations, of which Epstein was a member, the Trilateral Commission, Epstein was a member, Bilderberg Group, Bilderberg, he wasn't a member, but he knew all the people just about involved. World Economic Forum, he wasn't involved, but he called himself the concierge of the World Economic Forum. He passed through the Rockefeller University, knew the Rockefellers, knew James Goldsmith, who, in a sense, first discovered him. And he dealt with all branches of the Rothschild dynasty. Okay, now it's Kubrick actually implicated the Rothschilds in his movie through using one of the mansions for the big sex party, and so he's kind of implicating. He's making suggestions. Okay, and anyway, so all these names: Bilderberg, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, Rothschilds. All this kind of stuff that people have been talking about for decades. Okay, it's like Epstein has passed through all of them. Okay, and the interesting thing is all the science and the technology he's had his finger in. I mean, for instance, he actually organized a very important artificial intelligence conference in 2002. And all the big names in AI were there. Marvin Minsky, Roger Schank at that time, Rodney Brooks, they're all there. In fact, Virginia Giuffre, who accused Epstein's most well-known accuser, who unfortunately committed suicide last year, she said that basically she was at the conference and she was made to sleep with Marvin Minsky. Okay, so there's a side of Marvin Minsky I never knew existed. Okay, his wife strenuously denies it. But in light of the fact that what she has said, Virginia Giuffre has actually turned out to be right, it may well be the case. So I mean, it's like but anyway, so Epstein was involved in all these, kind of scientific, technological endeavors. But the pattern is that what was he was involved in cryptocurrency, predictive analytics, Palantir, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, surveillance, of course, not just in his house, but surveillance technologies in general. Basically, the idea is that he was a kind of like basically an agent, kind of involved in the creation of the techno cyber infrastructure for the one world order. Surveillance, cryptocurrency, analysis, predictive analysis, funding psychological research on changing people's behavior and controlling people. So that's that side of Epstein, which is really to do with this idea of a one world order, that there is a kind of powers that be that want to create this kind of like domination hierarchy, a kind of pyramid, and then eventually, something sits on top of that pyramid, and the question is what, and then what's going to happen? What is the end goal of this process? Okay, so we're going to just explain why this breakaway sect called Sabbatean Frankism is actually really behind both sides of this Epstein story. The kind of sexy, horrible, depraved stuff, the kind of pedophilia, the kind of like the really bad stuff, and this kind of the techno cyber infrastructure of the one world order stuff. Now, what does that have to do with Sabbatean Frankism? Well, look. All the reforms in Judaism, all the main sects, all the kind of like revolutions in Judaism really come from the Kabbalah, which is mystical Judaism. So, for instance, the fact that there is a kind of religious Zionism derives from the fact that there was a Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook who basically abrogated and changed the kind of the theology of settling Israel because it was forbidden before, but he kind of changed it and he kind of like paved the way for religious Zionism. And also, say the Hasidic movement that came from Baal Shem Tov, another a kind of Kabbalah rabbi. And even Spinoza, who the God intoxicated philosopher, was very steeped in the knowledge of the Kabbalah. I mean, when his God was really not the God of necessarily a superficial understanding of the God from the Torah. His God was really the God of the Kabbalah. That's where what they call panpsychism, pantheism derives from. Now, another huge movement that appeared in the 17th century, in the 1600s, was this movement called Sabbateanism, started by this Messiah claimant, Messiah to be called Sabbatai Zevi, or a Jewish friend taught me how to pronounce it one time. It's probably pronounced something more like Shagtai Zvi. Okay, so Shabbatai Ziva. We'll say Sabbatai Ziva because that's how it's spelled. It's easy for me to say. Sabbatai Zevi really created a lot of excitement in the 17th century. And he had about 1 million people, million Jews believing he was the Messiah, which is half all the Jews in Europe. People thought this is the Messianic age. People sold off all the possessions, ready to go back to, go back to rebuild the temple back in the 17th century. And he met with the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire because he appeared in Turkey, and then basically he to kind of profess his messiahship and his messiahhood. The Sultan of Turkey, of the Ottoman Empire, gave him an ultimatum: you convert to Islam or you die horribly. Okay, so he converted to Islam and lived the rest of his life on quite a comfortable pension. Okay, and had a quite nice life. So that was the end of the Messiah. But his movement carried on. Okay, so basically, his movement consisted of his teachings. What he was teaching was the idea of the Messianic age is upon us, and all the old laws, the Mosaic laws, can be forgotten now. So he taught a kind of like a kind of liberated form of Judaism of kind of open sexuality, free love, kind of all the previous don'ts become do's, all the thou shalt nots becomes thou may, and all the kind of like thou you should do, you don't have to do because all the Mosaic law is broken. You don't have to do it anymore. This is the Messianic age. So he kind of gave an expression to a side of Judaism which has always existed, like say even in the Bible, the Song of Solomon, the approach to God as a sexual romantic thing. So he kind of awakened that kind of Kabbalistic, kind of like joyous kind of expression of Judaism involving sex, involving dance, music, and all that kind of stuff, and breaking the taboos. Anyhow, that was his kind of like I guess his philosophy, his theology, and but it kind of like faded with his conversion to Islam. But a group of loyal followers kind of remained, and what they did was they interpreted his conversion to Islam as a kind of God-given, a kind of higher meaning kind of happening, not just a failed Messiah kind of end story, but really that he was converting to Islam to infiltrate Islam in order to, kind of like convert it and bless it into messiahship. So they became the Dome, and they all converted into Islam, with the goal of one day kind of transforming a Muslim society into something messianic, into something like kind of like the Messianic age. That was the kind of way of coming to terms with the fact that their Messiah had become, basically a servant of the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, kind of like lackey, you might say. Anyway, after Sabbatai Zevi's death, a couple of generations after he died, along came in the 18th century a Jacob Frank was born in Eastern Europe, and he traveled down to Smyrna, down to Turkey, and interacted with the Sabbateans, learned their kind of philosophy, their theology, and also Sufi techniques from the Muslim world. because because these Sabbateans were Muslims, and they kind of, I guess, incorporated Sufi ideas into their teaching. And he came back to Europe and he proclaimed himself the reincarnation of Shabbatai Zevi. He claimed himself to be the kind of representative of God on earth, as a kind of embodiment of God on earth. And he kind of started a new sect, a new breakaway cult from the Sabbatean sect called Frankism. And he took Sabbatai's ideas to new lengths. So he basically talked about not just kind of like forgetting the Mosaic law. He taught actively despising the Mosaic law, actively despising the Ten Commandments, and deliberately breaking the taboos and deliberately, proactively breaking those laws. Okay, so don't do this, don't kill, don't covet your neighbor's ass, don't kind of commit adultery. I mean, almost if he made it imperative on his followers to do this kind of stuff. He taught about the descent into the abyss of sin, and that was the way to redemption. It was redemption through sin. You take yourself to the abyss where no one can lift you up except God, and he taught that as a kind of pathway to what's called in Kabbalah Dayat, which is the unifying the 10 Sephiroth, and then unifying the male and the female to climb the seventh rung of Jacob's ladder, the highest attainment, which is really union with God, a union with the universe. So he taught that the way to do that is through this redemption through sin, a descent into the abyss, a descent into total moral deprivation. Okay, and that's wacky theology. But it's really, there are parallels in world religion. Say in the tantras, there's the same idea of left hand tantra. Also has this idea of breaking all the taboos, eating human flesh, um, kind of having sex with menstruating women, kind of eating all the forbidden foods, kind of digging up corpses in cemeteries and eating bits of their flesh just to get that kind of high energy psychic excitement. So this kind of stuff goes on in the other side, in other religions as well. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, there was the famous, infamous mad monk Rasputin. Okay, I recall the famous Boney M song back from the 70s. Rah rah Rasputin, lover of the Russian queen and lover of many of the Russian noblewomen of his time. And he really was like this kind of mystic magic man kind of character. But he belonged to a sect called the Kailisti, and their motto was sin to drive out sin. So again, the same idea: redemption through sin, redemption through kind of kind of like left-hand behaviors. We can go on. There's the Carpocratians, the Gnostic sect, and so it's a part of the religious landscape. You might call it the dark side, the left-hand side. You might call it the dark side of the Force, but it's always been there, and it's the expression of it that appeared in Judaism in the 18th century was called Frankism. So there's this kind of then a movement, Sabbatean Frankism, which has been basically a part of the kind of religious landscape in Europe, and it's been very influential. Okay, so when we talk about this kind of like redemption through sin, breaking all the taboos, including incest, murder, whatever, doing the most depraved things, then the connection with Epstein is this idea that the Maxwells were of the lineage of family lines which derived from the Frankists. So this idea that, there are ideas that elite circles in the cabal believe that Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father and Jeffrey Epstein's collaborator, was actually believed or claimed to be a kind of reincarnation of Jacob Frank. So there's a connection, a lineage of ideas, and through Ghislaine Maxwell, that's where you get the kind of sex, the pedophile, the kind of like that side of things, and maybe from other vectors as well. But that's one explanation of the kind of like the kind of like the stuff that's hitting the headlines, the kind of pedophilia, and the kind of like the horrible, depraved stuff, the horrible, nasty stuff. Okay. Now, the other side to Jacob Frank's message was revolutionary. Okay, well, it's basically political. And in a sense, kind of 17th, 18th century, these were revolutionary times. And what Jacob Frank did was he kind of synthesized kind of like the kind of revolutionary currents of that age, the Renaissance, Enlightenment revolutions. We're talking, English Civil War, French Revolution, American Revolutions. These are kind of revolutionary times with revolutionary thinking in the Kabbalah. Okay, so he kind of made a synthesis And what he was really believing, okay, what he was believing was basically an overthrow of society and basically a kind of like breaking of the old order in order to create something new, which was, part of kind of the thinking of the time. So he kind of merged in with the kind of thoughts which were circulating at the time he was alive. But he gave it a kind of extra twist because he basically the twist is that basically instead of just starting a revolution to build a parliamentary democracy or liberal democracy, the twist is that basically you build this new world order. You just demolish the existing world. You overturn the existing institutions to create a new world order, a power structure for one day the Messiah to come along and sit at the top of this one world order. So this is where kind of like kind of like revolutionary thinking merges with messianic, prophetic, apocalyptic thinking. Okay, so and the other side of things which Jacob Frank inherited from the Sabbateans was takia, basically this idea of becoming Muslims in Turkey, the Dome, they converted to Islam, but they kept their Judaism, they kept their Sabbateanism. Okay, they kind of breakaway sectism, but outwardly they were kind of Muslims and kind of dissimulation. So Jacob Frank taught the same thing. He told his followers to mix with the nations in order to cause this overthrow society. You need to penetrate into society and mix with society, convert to Catholicism, convert to the religions of the time, and they were very successful. And they made their way kind of marrying into Polish nobility, into the Habsburg aristocracy, into the high echelons of the Habsburg Empire, the administration. And basically, they became very, very successful and powerful. And so the idea was basically you penetrate into society in order to bring it down and change it. Okay. Now, the other side of the political revolutionary message, if they believed in this descent into the abyss of sin for personal redemption and personal enlightenment, they also believed that you have to create as much chaos and sin and deprivation in society as well to hasten messianic redemption, to hasten messianic consciousness, to hasten the coming of the Messiah. And this is in this kind of mix, this kind of convoluted mix of ideas, is what really kind of like this really powerful brew. It is powerful. It allows you to infiltrate. It allows you to have a mission. It allows you to have an end goal. It allows you to do kind of stuff that can, like the Ghislaine Maxwell stuff to gain power over people through blackmail, through, kind of initiation, but doing all this kind of like really left-hand stuff and keeping people in your power because you have all this kind of stuff you can blackmail them with. So this really kind of like mix of ideas became the kind of ideology that of Sabbatean Frankism that merged with his ideas on his theology of enlightenment, you might say. Now, how does it connect with Jeffrey Epstein? Well, the connection is okay. Now we are kind of like kind of converging on this kind of the big conspiracy. There's a huge, ginormous literature and a kind of like volumes and volumes of study and genealogies and details that have been kind of accumulated by loads of people. So this is the big conspiracy, okay, in the conspiracy theory circles. This is the biggie. This is the one. This is the central story, and it's the idea that now Jacob Frank spent his last years in Offenbach, which is Offenbach is a town in Germany. Well, it's not a town anymore. It would have been a town, a small village in the 18th century. Now Offenbach is next door really to Frankfurt, separated by a river. Now today it's just one conurbation. I mean, the center of Offenbach, the center of Frankfurt is it's a short walk. Okay, 15, 20, half an hour walk, maybe 15, 20 minutes. And before it was separated by the river. If you cross over the bridge, it's just basically next door to adjacent parts of town, you might say. But anyway, who lived in Frankfurt at the same time as Jacob Frank in his last years? Well, it was the Rothschilds. This is when they were starting out. This is when they were, just before they exploded into the banking scene in Europe and in America. So basic idea, the basic conspiracy theory is basically that uh, the Rothschilds absorbed elements, some of it, all of it, who knows, of Jacob Frank's thinking, and that the Rothschilds then persuaded this Adam Weishaupt, who was a Jesuitly trained philosopher. And basically, the idea is that basically they instilled in him the kind of Jacob Frank philosophy, and he went off to start this thing called the Illuminati. And the Rothschilds allegedly financed this Illuminati. So this is the big conspiracy theory. And then the Illuminati now have basically, infiltrated powers, institutions, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, all these kind of separate secret societies, governments, obviously Rothschilds and banking. And then together, this kind of like a kind of financial interest and this kind of conspiratorial network has basically been the hidden hand behind the rise of the modern world. Okay, so that's the basic idea. And this hidden hand wants to create a one world order, a kind of surveillance state, a power structure of regulation and control, and like a great big pyramid. And on top of that pyramid sits an eye. And so the idea is that basically Jeffrey Epstein, through his connections with Rockefellers, Rothschilds, and stuff, was an agent of this one world order, and that this one world order is coming into being, and is eventually the program of Jacob Frank and the Sabbateans will be realized. They have this kind of control structure, at least in the Western world. China, Russia, Iran probably exists outside of it, and people will speculate that this is why there is this kind of war going on between the kind of Western powers and these kind of powers outside of this kind of like pyramid of control. That's the basic idea. That's the basic theory. Okay, so it's kind of funny. There is a police surveillance state developing in China, separate from this, kind of surveillance state that's slowly growing in Europe and America and getting tighter and tighter. So it might be the case that we eventually the world separately forms into one great big kind of like one structure. Now the battle is really to see what goes at the top of the pyramid. If society is going to coalesce into something, something like a kind of dominance hierarchy, or something like a control structure of regulation and kind of kind of like a stable structure of basically governance in which all the people of the world lives, then really the final battle is what goes on top of that pyramid. Okay, so I think this is where we diverge from the conspiracy theorists, because I don't say in a pejorative term. I mean, people conspire, and it's right that people should speculate on what people are conspiring. Okay, now the nightmare scenario of the conspiracy theorists is that you've got a power control structure, all your financial transactions monitored through cryptocurrency, digital currency, surveillance state, AI surveillance, kind of like a predictive analytics, everything monitored, everything, kind of like regulated, absolutely no freedom to rebel anymore. And the nightmare scenario is that sitting at the top of the pyramid are kind of like, pedophile, human flesh eating, adrenochrome, blood drinking vampires who are psychopathic, who like to make and exchange torture videos and do really horrible things. Psychopaths, basically, and they'll be on top of the pyramid, and they control the world. Horrible. But that seems to be something which the Epstein files is kind of like giving us a little glimpse into, which is a nightmare, the nightmare scenario. So how can we allay that scenario? How can we, okay, we're going to shift to another gear now. Okay, so we're kind of explained, okay, the Rothschilds, conspiracy theory, one world order. That's one side of Epstein. The other side of Epstein, the kind of dirty stuff, the kind of like horrible, depraved stuff, and basically how it derives from Sabbatean Frankism, and that the end goal is this control structure, and basically, and the Messiah sits on top of it. Okay, now how can we basically put something on top of the pyramid that's actually something people can agree with, and that can actually serve people, that isn't something bad, that isn't kind of like, cannibal, vampire, pedophiles. Okay, so we're going to shift into a different gear and explain things in relation to my what I'm doing, basically. And I think what I'm doing is going to have an impact on this kind of like unfolding. um this is there's something about William Blake and my life and synchronicities. My son's called Blake, and William Blake's really important. He's called England's only prophet, and he's made predictions. He's made prophecies for the great happening to happen in London. Okay, the great advents, the great kind of like the great future prophetic events going to happen in London. He says, the fields of Islington, Marylebone, Primrose Hill to St John's Wood were builded over with pillars of gold, and there Jerusalem's pillars stood, wrote William Blake. So he's really talking about the future, to build Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land. That's what he's talking about. And we think he's right. Okay, we think he's right. The interesting thing is that the Sabbatean Frankist influence is actually was part of William Blake's life. And that's because his mother and father were involved in the Moravian church. And the Sabbateans were very active in Moravia, and it's believed that they penetrated infiltrated the Moravian church. And so that the Moravian church had this thing called a sifting time, where in London there was loads of sexual scandal, and basically there was a kind of sexualization of spirituality that occurred in the Moravian church at this time. And the sifting time was exactly when William Blake's mother and father were involved in the Moravian church. So this idea that William Blake got some of his sexual ideas from his mother and father's involvement in the Moravian church. And then he himself he and his wife were part of the Swedenborg church, and he was heavily influenced by Swedenborg. Now, Swedenborg, when he came to London to visit, he actually stayed next door in a tavern next door to a rabbi, a famous rabbi, Rabbi Dr. Samuel Jacob Falk. He was called a Baal Shem of London. So he was really kind of like a famous rabbi who was really into the Kabbalah. And he was really also a Sabbatean. He basically absorbed a Sabbatean influence, and he taught Swedenborg sexual techniques, sex magic, essentially, the sexualized form of Tantra that was a part of Sabbateanism. So essentially, through the Moravian Church and Swedenborg, this is really two massive inputs into William Blake. And you can understand his kind of like sexuality, his sexual expression, his interest in Tantra and kind of sexual meditation techniques, and really derives from Sabbatai Zevi. So that's the connection between the Sabbatean sect and William Blake and London. Now here I am in London, and I think what I'm doing is going to be, or is already going to be very interesting to the Sabbatean Frankists. I mean, I know people who are involved in the kind of like who knew Jeffrey Epstein. I know people. I almost talked at the World Economic Forum Davos this year, and last year on my LinkedIn there was someone spied my profile. And I could see on LinkedIn where they worked, and one was a board of directors of the World Economic Forum, and actually, paid the subscription to LinkedIn to see who it was, but it didn't show the actual person. It showed who they worked for and who they were. So, in a sense, these people sort of know me, and people who follow me are kind of involved in, I think, deep state, American intelligence, American secret services. I've got this guy, professor, who's, you see his website, he's like a advisor to the Presidential Homeland Security Commission and stuff like that. So there are people in, you might call deep state, who follow my work already. But I think as I get more well known, I think what I'm saying, what I do, will be very, very interesting to the Sabbatean Frankists, and I'll tell you why. Okay, so I want to say I actually have a funny relationship with Judaism. Myself, I have a funny relationship with Judaism. My ethnic group, we're called the Hakka people, Hakka. It's in Chinese, it means the guest people. Hakka, guest people, Hakka. And we are called Jews of the Orient. 19th century missionaries thought we were lost tribes of Israel. And there's funny parallels between my ethnic group and Jews in Europe. There's a funny relationship between us and power. So we're in about 5% of the all people who call themselves Chinese, which is roughly the percentage of Jews in America, Europe. Funny enough. And so in the 90s, there's 4 states which call themselves kind of Chinese. Okay, which are many Chinese. Okay, China, there's Taiwan, there's Hong Kong, and there's Singapore. In the 1990s, okay, basically all the leaders of all those four, kind of political entities were my ethnic group, and we're 5% of the population of China. So there's something funny going on, and in a society, China, which is Confucian and known for revering book learning and books and kind of knowledge, my ethnic group has a particular reputation for being bookish. Okay, so it's funny. There's always funny parallels, and there's loads more. Okay, there's loads more. As for Jews, as for the lost tribes of Israel, there's a people called the B'nai Menashe in Burma and India, and they're given right to return by Amishaf, which is an Israeli organization, to settle in Israel. So they're kind of like recognized as a lost tribe of Israel, and they're serving the IDF. They basically have this right to return. But anyway, years ago, my friend who taught me how to say Shaktite Zvi instead of Sabbatai Zivi, she brought a book to one of my talks, and it was To the Prophets, The Lost Tribes. And in it was a photograph of a B'nai Menashe teenager, and it looked very similar to how I looked as a teenager. And also, I look at photographs of my extended family, cousins and distant cousins, and they kind of look like B'nai Menashe. They look like B'nai Menashe of Burma and India. And I learned just recently that the Indian B'nai Menashe, they have an oral tradition where they believe they pass through kind of Iran, Afghanistan, then China on the way to India. So maybe we are like a contingent from that group, that migration, which kind of stayed in China. I don't know. I don't know. But it's interesting. So yeah, my funny relationship with Judaism. When my fractal brain theory book came out, when I finished it in 2016, okay, when I advertised it on social media, the first flurry of sales, about 30, 40 books were sold, not huge amounts. I mean, the first few days there was like people PayPal'd me. But the funny thing is, about 20, 30% of all those people were either Levites or Cohen. Okay, the names were something Cohen, something Levi, and one guy who had a stage name. I only knew his name was Cohen through his PayPal name. So a totally disproportionate number of people who ordered the Fractal Brain Theory book in the first flurry of orders for a signed copy were Cohen or Levites. And then a few months after the book was released, a friend of a friend wanted to meet me, buy me breakfast and buy the two books I just wrote at that time, Quest and Fractal Brain Theory. And I was talking to him. His name was Rappaport. And I said to him, "Oh, you're Jewish?" And I said to him, "Yeah. The first flurry of orders, 20, 30% of all the people who bought the Fractal Brain Theory book were Cohen or Levite." And he said, "Yeah, my name is Rappaport, but I'm actually lineage of Cohen." So it comes up again and again. I could go on and on about this funny relationship I have with Judaism. But also, Israeli psychedelic trance is something I had a funny connection with, because when I was playing with Cosmosis, this very well-known trance band, they happened to be on the same record label as Israel's very top psychedelic trance act called Astral Projection. And I met them. The record company gave a party in Liverpool in was it 1998 in February, and I met them. This is in Liverpool. They're flown over from Tel Aviv, I remember. And anyway, Astral Projection headlined this Supernova festival that was attacked by Hamas on October the 7th a couple of years ago. So it means that basically there's a connection I have with the Israeli psychedelic trance scene, and it's very special because you notice the world over, the psychedelic trance scene. Okay, there's a whole bunch of mix of people that go to these trance parties, but you get a disproportionate number of tech people, and you get a disproportionate number of sons and daughters of elites, sons and daughters of politicians, judges. I knew the twins. They were the daughters of the chief of police in New Zealand. They kind of, yeah, sons and daughters. I know a friend of mine. His dad used to run Tesco's. He was CEO of Tesco's back in the 70s. You find sons and daughters of elites hang out in these parties, and in Burning Man, the Burning Man, which is sort of like a big trance festival, psychedelic festival, Burning Man. You find all the big names in tech: Zuckerberg, Eric Schmidt, Sergey Brin, in the past Elon Musk, hang out in these kind of places. So I think there's kind of like a kind of juxtaposition of Israeli psychedelic trance, being Jews of the Orient, this kind of like interest I have already from these Cohens and Levites makes me kind of anticipate, if it is not the case already, that the Sabbatean Frankists will be intensely interested in what I do. Okay. And the reason, okay, last section of the talk, the reason why they're going to be very interested in what I do, okay, is because the AI stuff, I think I really am on the way to creating true artificial intelligence. I think ASI, AGI is in my head, is in my laptop, is in my code, and it's in my hands. And I think I'm the person most far advanced to creating true AI on this planet. That's what I believe. Okay. And this the fact that it's derived from this kind of like this kind of like fractal brain theory, this symmetry theory of life and intelligence, and the two breakthroughs I've been talking about in the past year, which I'm still going to make detailed videos on, the breakthrough of showing how a neuron works like the entire brain, the central key circuit at the heart of the human brain, and how it works, gives rise to this kind of core cognitive ability that can be seen as a kind of perfect symmetry of how a neuron works. It gives me the kind of confidence and to basically to it gives me a kind of has really emboldened me to really kind of like to push forward with the religious and kind of political message, because I think I'm going to, once I pull out the sword and the stone, okay, in general, all the tech bros, all the kind of people in general, you're going to have a platform to talk about political things, religious things, all kinds of things, moral things, ethical things, to a very wide audience, but especially your Sabbatean Frankist crowd. And the reason is because in Judaism there's this thing called the legend of the golem. Okay, it's this idea that in Prague in the 14th century, a kind of rabbi created this golem to protect the Jews from pogroms, from being persecuted. And this golem, this kind of robot, this kind of like a kind of like a simulacrum, like a likeness of a human being, was then did its job, okay, and then was kind of put up in this kind of cathedral. And the legend has it that the golem will be reawakened one day, and that basically this kind of likeness of a human being, this kind of robot, will return, okay, and that the legend is that whoever creates the golem, whoever creates the golem will have understood the nature of God, because to create the human being and create the human mind, the likeness of a human mind and the likeness of a human body, is really to understand the human being, which is the image of God. It's really to decode the nature of God. Now, in my work in AI was really, really inspired by Blade Runner, and in general, back in the 70s, all these sci-fi novels, comics I used to read that involved kind of these humanoid or robot forms, okay, R2D2, C3PO, all these the idea of a robot, a humanoid robot, which would be the golem, was really inspirational of why I got into AI. And what's happening now with these humanoid robots, especially the ones in China, and even the Tesla Optimus robots, that's not bad, not as impressive as the Chinese robots. I mean, the X-Plane robot, amazing. They thought it was a human in a suit because it's so realistic. Anyway, I think this is my super energy efficient AI. It's perfect for these kind of humanoid robot products, I think. I'll tell you something funny. Just recently, I contacted the CEO of Hanson Robotics, a lady who actually wrote to me years ago, back in 2020, because I was on a billing for this conference in San Francisco. That didn't quite happen because it was April 2020, and then lockdown, coronavirus happened, and the conference was cancelled. This meetup. Well, she wrote to me. We exchanged a few letters, and back in 2020. But recently, I saw one of her interviews, and I wrote to her just saying, she is talking about using the ancient wisdom, kind of like the esoteric religion, in order to use use humanoid robots to use humanoid robots to communicate to ancient wisdom, to change people's minds, to make people behave in a more ethical and kind of change the world by changing people's minds and people's mindsets and outlooks. So I thought, oh my God, this lady I could work with in the future. And I just wrote to her saying, look, we think so much alike. I mean, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to broadcast this worldview that's going to change people's minds, essentially, to change people's behavior and change the world. Anyway, we've been exchanging emails, and she says she's a great fan of my work. Okay, amazing. I mean, it's like I mean, she knows Ben Goetz, all those kind of people, all those kind of big names. So I was very encouraged by that. But anyway, Sophia was the kind of really famous humanoid sort of like robot. It didn't have a body, but it had a kind of head, and it kind of like made a likeness of a humanoid. That's because Hansen worked for Disney for making these kind of shows, puppets essentially. But I think that gave me an inspiration to. Last email she said, I said to meet up, and basically, she probably knows the industry because she's based in Hong Kong, and basically, so the idea of kind of connecting my software to humanoid robots, I'm basically one stepping stone away from that whole scene. And the kind of like the billionaire meetups I've been attending in the summer, the billionaires, they're all from Hangzhou, Zhejiang. That's where DeepSeek is based in China. But that's also where Unitree is based. The robot company that did the robots for the Chinese New Year festival. Anyway, so XPeng is in Shenzhen near Hong Kong, and there's a whole load of robot companies in Hong Kong and Shenzhen. So it's basically, when everything's done and finished, basically the idea that my software will basically go into these humanoid robots is I can see it. I can see it really happening. And then I would be in a sense, the person who creates the golem, because what's lacking in these humanoid robots is a proper brain. They're dumb. They completely can't function in a human environment because they don't have the human intelligence. So I think that is something to really visualize, to really stimulate my work. So I think once you do that within the context of Judaism, you are the reawakener of the golem. And I think this is something that the Sabbatean Frankists would totally understand. Now, because the my AI is based on this fractal brain theory, this kind of like life symmetry theory, that's fractal. The idea that expands into the universe and kind of matches this idea of the universe as a giant brain, a giant mind, a giant organism. It basically explains the microcosm as macrocosm thing. So this image of God is also the image of the universe. So that is, in a sense, a revealing of a deep secret of the Kabbalah. So I'm saying things directly related to the Kabbalah, the tree of knowledge, the tree of Sephiroth. I'm giving a breakdown in terms of neuroscience, in terms of genes, in terms of AI, in terms of a new strain of discrete mathematics, recursively self-modifying mathematics. I'm really decoding kind of core secrets of the Kabbalah. So I'm saying to these Sabbatean Frankists in the future, look, this is what you want to know. This is the revelation of these kind of like secrets of the Kabbalah that have been pending for revelation for centuries, for generations, for millennia. And what's really okay, this is major thing that I've been working on over the years is basically try and understand why mystical experiences happen. So, I'll actually append it on this Patreon thread, this Patreon post. I'll append the core live script I wrote uh, describing how paths of expansion, why they lead to states of being one with God. But in that script, if you read it, you might recall that I actually gave an explanation for why psychedelics work. Psychedelic drugs affect all the different neurotransmitters: acetylcholine, norepinephrine, serotonin, dopamine, uh, gamma aminobutyric acid. They affect all of them. And what I tried to show was basically the common ground, the common factor was basically that psychedelic drugs basically work in the same way that paths of expansion work. And the idea is basically paths of expansion. You're trying to kind of suppress fear and desire. And basically, you're trying to overcome fear and desire through this path of expansion. But what psychedelic drugs are doing through binding heavily and disrupting the activation and the functioning of the hypothalamus and the amygdala, which are really the centers of fear and desire, then you achieve directly what you would achieve in a lifetime on a spiritual path of a path of expansion. Okay, which is the path of the mythic quest hero, Tantra, Kabbalah, etc. Now, okay, the recent work, the breakthrough I was talking about this from last year, the core circuit of the brain, which gives rise to this core cognitive ability. Now, what I've managed to do is basically link up that with the idea of suppressing fear and desire through suppressing the hypothalamus and the amygdala. Because at the heart, at the core of the core circuit is the hypothalamus and the amygdala. So they've got this core circuit involving the hippocampus, the anterocingulate cortex, retrosplenial cortex, kind of nucleus accumbens, the dopamine pathway of addiction. At the center of that core nexus is the engine, the real engine of the mind, the hypothalamus and the amygdala. What it means is that I can now show if you're not suppressing the amygdala and the hypothalamus directly with psychedelic drugs, what you're doing is basically you're suppressing it through activating the knowledge structure of your life, all your fears, all your desires, and you're going out into the world and you're doing it in such a way that you're getting a perfect score. You're going to satisfy all your desires and you're overcoming all your fears. And in order to overcome the fear of death and annihilation, I mean, it's the knowledge of God and it's really love and positive feelings, which really ultimately, if you really get it right, if you really achieve perfection, then you would have suppressed fear and desire in a way that psychedelic drugs do rather directly in the space of an hour or so. Okay, so what it means is I'm on my way, not just creating AI, but to a unified theory of why paths of expansion work in terms of reduction, not just in terms of psychedelic drugs affecting neurotransmitter systems in the center of the brain, hypothalamus and amygdala, but also how the core circuit interacts with the amygdala hypothalamus and how that core circuit gives rise to all the things you do in a path of expansion and as you live your life in order to have the same effect as psychedelic drugs, suppress your fear and desire. Okay, so that is the thing which, in a sense, the Kabbalists in general, mystics in general, people involved in spirituality in general, will be very interested in. But I think the Sabbatean Frankists will find that very interesting. The idea that, it's really kind of like a give an explanation to show this really is the path to enlightenment. But what I think is not the path to enlightenment is this kind of descent into the abyss stuff. I don't think this kind of like the abyss of sin, this kind of like a sin through redemption through sin, redemption through kind of depravity. I don't think it works. So what you can do, you're in a powerful position then to say, look, yeah, there is left-hand tantra and sexuality, but it's really a marriage between heaven and hell. And what I'd say to the Sabbatean Frankists is that basically you've got too much hell and you don't have enough heaven. And this idea that by going to sinking yourself in the very depths of depravity and sin, somehow how are you going to get to enlightenment? You have a kind of like a platform and also a rationale to explain why it's wrong and show why this is a better way. So the better way is basically some initiation using psychedelic drugs and then put people on this path of expansion that also involves sex but consensual sex. So I guess black magic is this idea that when a person thinks I am God, selfishness, I am God, everyone else is my object for use and to abuse and to do what I want with, to the idea of white magic and the force that everyone is God. So you still can have your kinky sex as long as it's consensual. You can still have your, even like a really, kind of left hand stuff, really kind of like sexually extreme, adventurous stuff, as long as it's consensual. Okay. Anyway, so that's what I'd say to Sabbatean Frankists. But now we get to the really interesting part, which is the pyramid. If this pyramid of power is forming, what would we sit on the top of the pyramid? Now, look, even in Sabbatean Frankist ideology, the depravity, the anarchy, the chaos is not an end in itself. It's basically an end to ushering in the coming of the Messiah and the ushering the messianic redemption and the messianic age. What I think is the case is basically what sits on top of the pyramid is basically a worldview. And it's basically a worldview based on the apocalypse when we can reveal microcosm as macrocosm, that the human body is as a universe, and also use the explanation how we are all God, okay, which I dealt with in previous talks in the Core One Live #1 script of how, basically how we can be one with the universe, be one with God, and it's actually the way things really are. What sits on top of the pyramid is basically a reform of all knowledge, a worldview based on the idea that we are all God. And the critical thing is the reform of ethics, morality, and political philosophy. And the ethics, the morality, rational basis of morality, that's been predicted in the Kabbalah, that's also predicted in Islam, comes about when you have a rational explanation for why we are all God. Because morality, the golden rule, treat others as you like to be treated yourself, the idea of equality, justice for all, these really derive from the idea that we're all God. So the idea that there is a teaching of the prophets and there is a secret of the prophets, once you can establish the secret of the prophets that we are all God on rational terms, that gives you your rational basis for morality for the 21st century. And the political philosophy based on this idea of apocalypse, revelation that we're all God based on science and this kind of fractal brain theory, this life symmetry, life brain mind symmetry theory. But basically, once you have that in place, this apocalypse, then basically that is the grounding for the reform of all knowledge, the reform of ethics and morality. It's not new ethics. It's basically reawakening the kind of teachings of the prophets, the golden rule, that kind of stuff. Be nice, love each other, that all the good stuff. Okay, not the kind of like the kind of Sabbatean Frankist stuff. Breaking every rule and kind of basically doing all the don'ts become do's, including thou shalt not kill and all that kind of stuff. And you basically returning the law. You're basically returning all the good stuff. And in terms of political philosophy, it's going to be just your standard, the stuff that's really good and people recognize to be good. Justice for all, equality, liberty, fraternity, sorority, meritocracy, a kind of just world, kind of people, a fair world for everyone. So what I think is the case is that basically, people come and go. You don't put someone on top of the pyramid. You don't put a person or a family or bloodline, because people come and go. Your greatest king, your most enlightened sage will become corrupt, will become senile. So what you put on top of the pyramid is the worldview, and from the worldview flows manifestos and protocols and constitutions and laws and basically modes of behavior, ethics, plus political philosophy and morality. So I think if I get into a position in this world where basically I can really influence the Sabbatean Frankists and the powers that be in this world, and then in the future influence the Chinese Communist Party and influence the world of Islam and Israel, ambitious stuff, isn't it? And the Pope and Dalai Lama and be able to influence all of them, I'd say basically if you have all these separate pyramids of power, then what you have to put on top of all these pyramids is basically this reformed worldview, which is basically what the Renaissance was all about. The European, the Italian Renaissance, German Renaissance, English Renaissance, Spanish Renaissance, all involved this reform of all knowledge. And we're just doing the same thing for the 21st century, where we reform the current worldview, morality, political philosophy, ethics. And this reform view sits on top of the pyramid. And from that, comes the kind of new order, the new world order based on the truth, based on the idea that we're all God. And then the purpose of society becomes to love and to live and to prosper and to basically ultimately try and become one with God, which is what the Sabbatean Frankists want. Ultimately, in their religion, in their theology, yes, they want the Messiah, but ultimately their aim was Dayat, the ultimate aim in Kabbalah, unify the 10 Sephiroth and unify the male and female, ascend to the seventh rung of Jacob's ladder and become one with God. So if you're a Sabbatean Frankist out there, or you're the current Jeffrey Epstein, then look, we've got to have a chat sometime, okay? Okay, so like ambitious talk. I know, ambitious talk. There's more to come. Look, there's another talk coming soon on the Iran stuff. So I've been thinking about the Sabbatean Frankist stuff, Jeffrey Epstein stuff, but I've also been thinking a lot about the Iran war and Shia, what's happening in Israel, the kind of like the apocalypse, the Christian fundamentalist Christian Zionists, but also putting it in the context of world prophecy. Instead of saying, kind of prophecy is stupid and nonsense, you've got to give people a better interpretation of prophecy, which is the mythic archetype, which is the prophetic archetype. That's actually positive. It gives people a proper apocalypse and a proper kind of happy ending, I suppose. So soon very soon we're gonna release another talk on Iran and what's going to happen, what's been happening, what's the kind of upshot, and how can we kind of make things work out for the best. Okay. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Thank you for your support, and there's more coming really soon. Okay, I'm going to leave it there.